Every year, tennis players from around the world compete for excellence, triumphing against all odds to emerge the champions. I'm your host, Madi Harrison. Join me as I get up close and personal with these dynamic individuals and find out what it takes to go for greatness. Let's go beyond the match. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the very first episode of Beyond the Match. I'm your host, Madi Harrison. My very first guest is a dear friend of mine, Katarina Kozarov. Katarina is a professional tennis player on the WTA Tour. Prior to becoming a professional tennis player, Katarina was one of the greatest tennis players and athletes ever to compete for Furman University. During her collegiate tennis career, Katarina received so many academic and athletic awards. She's a two-time Southern Conference Player of the Year. She's a 2019 Southern Conference Tournament MVP, and in 2020, she became an All-American. She achieved career-high college tennis rankings of 7 in singles and 21 in doubles. After college, she started competing on the pro tennis circuit. So far, she's won 2 singles titles and 4 doubles titles, and been ranked as high as 302 in singles and 288 in doubles. Aside from all of these incredible numbers, Katarina is extremely well respected and loved among her peers. She's overcome some of life's toughest battles and is a true role model to many, including myself. I couldn't be more honored to have her as my first guest. Katarina, welcome to Beyond the Match.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. So thanks for such kind words. You got me tearing up right from the start.
Oh my gosh.
Thanks,
Oh no, I'm so happy you're here. You just got back to Florida. You were in Colombia last week competing, and you were all over Europe before that. That's 3 continents in less than a month.
Yes.
How do you do it all?
Great question. I keep asking myself that question every time, honestly. You know, since I started playing professionally after college, like you had said, I had some hardships going on, some family stuff happening, and I didn't really start playing until the 2022 season fully on tour. And as it started, it was about a late March, April time. And towards the end of that year, it was kind of just a survival year. And it's like first time experience, everything. And I was just happy to be able to compete at that point. It was just getting back on the court and competing again. But 2023 season was, I would say, officially my full year on tour, you know, and I would say I overdid it a little bit with the travels. You know, just last year, I took 82 flights, it was way too much on the body. So it was little to say that I had a very big burnout towards the end of the year, you know. So I think one of the things that I'm learning for this year as I'm back traveling, I'm trying to take it down a notch. You know, my last few travels maybe are not showing that, but I'm really trying to take more breaks along the way.
So what do you think that comes from? Do you think that comes from just like not being used to all the different conditions, or having too many tournaments on your schedule, or what?
I think it's very easy to get caught in chasing points, defending points, you know, constantly be like, oh, I want to go play this tournament, right? Because ITF tournaments, they come up quite late. We don't know about a month or 2 in advance, right? And it's always very last minute planning. And you see something, you're like, oh, I think this would be a great chance, you know, for me to go play. And there's so many things and so many variables that go into it that I think at the start, when I started playing it, I didn't really think about it, right? Like whether it's food, different culture. Like when I go to Asia, I love Asia, but I unfortunately never had really great results there, and started wondering like, why is that? You know, different players playing there and different styles, and so many things that go into when you're competing that I think the first year out, when you're just trying it all out, experiencing for the first time, it's like, oh, I got this, you know, it's just tennis all around, but there's so many things that actually go into it. So now as I have more experience throughout these tournaments, it's like, no, let me take a step back. Let me see what I want to kind of prefer, which conditions I want to play in, and where it's really the right choice to go to.
Yeah. And you started this year in Asia.
I did.
So you've also been to Asia this year.
Yeah.
So what about like, what are some of the different conditions that you faced even week to week, Europe to Colombia last week?
One of the biggest things probably weather, right? A lot of places a lot hotter than the other. For example, Colombia is very high altitude. It was over 8,000 feet where we played last week, which is probably the highest I've ever been to. Actually, the first time when I landed, when I got out of the airport, I got so dizzy that I thought I was going to faint. I was like, what is happening to me, right? It's your body having to like step out of the airport. It's like, I got 2-3 days. Let's get ready. Let's get moving. But I think sometimes when you're constantly changing, I think it really takes a toll on your body. And honestly, mentally, right? Jet lag over time. When I get to Asia, it's about 12-hour difference. So it's like 1 or 2 a.m. I'm like up and I'm like, I'm ready to go. Put me on the court now. But
Let's go back to the very beginning. What was life like for young Katarina?
It was great. It was awesome. I was an only child. I was an only child who had the whole world in front of her. You know, I had an amazing childhood. I had amazing parents who really did their best to give me everything that I've ever wanted. And that was so much more than tennis. Tennis was just kind of part of it. You know, I started tennis. They kind of threw me out there on the court, just hoping for this only child not to get lost in all this other distractions, you know. And so when I was about 3.5 years old, our neighbor was, my parents were playing tennis with him, and he was like, "Come on over, like I'll just have her over and hit some tennis balls." And he was an amazing guy, still is to this day. And he had a different philosophy to tennis, and he really got me to fall in love with the sport. So for many years, until I started competing when I was about 7 or 8 years old, it was just him and I on the court every day, and my parents coming along, and it just seemed like a perfect childhood in my house, and the court being right by the house. It's like all I had was my house, walk in the morning, spend the whole day there, just play around and come back home.
So did your parents play at a high level?
No, actually, neither of my parents were ever athletes. I always joke around. I have no idea how I got here sometimes, because I always say, I don't think I'm really mostly a genetically athletic person. I definitely have other attributes that got me to be at the professional level where I am right now. But my college teammates will know this, but I always struggled with my running, and I was always way behind, you know, and at the start people didn't believe me, but it's just because I was never really pushed from that area physically. As a child, I was always a bit of injury prone and always kind of taking it easy, you know, but when I started getting to college in 2016, it's kind of like, bam, like you go right into it. There's no slowing down. You have to keep up with your team. You have to push yourself for the team. And all my teammates were very fast. They ran track in high school, most of them. And I was like, oh, it's at the back of the stadium, like on the other side of the track. But, you know, all that pushing and all that pushing beyond the limits eventually led to the success and led to the results that I had in college.
So in your ebook, which was absolutely amazing, I think it's so insightful and would benefit so many players and parents and coaches all to read. But in that, you call yourself a chubby kid who is unathletic with a big dream. Your words, not mine. So at what point did that shift? Because even getting to the D1 level is so impressive. So at what point did that shift?
Right. I definitely was a chubby kid growing up. I love to eat. I still do. But I was, you know, I was never really pushed from, like I said, from the physical aspect. And tennis it was a game I loved. But when I was growing up, I was a chubby kid who always stood in place and just knew how to hit the ball really hard. Like I would just hit it. I was like, if it goes somewhere, I'm like, I'm not ready for that ball. Someone else got this. But I think things changed when I got to the IMG Academy, you know, for high school. That was the biggest transition that I took. I was only 14 years old. I left my mom behind. My dad came here with me, which was probably the hardest thing at the time I had to go through, because I was very, very close to my mom. And leaving her behind took a huge shock on me. And of course, different culture, different everything, getting used to here. But when I got to Academy, there was this ambition and this atmosphere to just inspire you to get better and work harder. And after all those hours and work we put in and coaches we've been in, you were in it with me, right? You know, that feeling and years in that feeling and years of working like that, and that work ethic eventually leads you to where you want to go.
So you're Serbian, but as you said, grew up part of your childhood in America. Numerous of my other friends who also are from other countries, but moved to America for tennis, now that they're older, they have this kind of like mixed sense of identity. Do you ever have those sorts of feelings at all?
For sure. I like to call I'm always somewhere, because back home, my friends always joke, they're like, oh, you're so American. And then here, people are like, oh, you're Serbian, you know? And I'm like, and I'm never going to find myself somewhere. I'm like somewhere in the middle of Atlantic Ocean in between. And I think over time, there were years when I really struggled with that, you know, kind of trying to find where I fit in. But I think the beauty in nowadays culture and how society works is that we're all embracing who we are, and we're all different, and we're all unique and special in a way. And I do view that both of those sides. I'm always going to be Serbian, but I am aware that I'm very Americanized. So I do think there's benefits to having both of those perspectives.
Yeah. No,
so I'm proud to embrace both of the sides.
Yeah. How does that affect your sense of belonging whenever you play, say, Fed Cup and you're representing Serbia?
I love that. That's always been the biggest dream of mine, representing a country. I'm never going to forget the first time we walked on the court. We were playing against Mexico, and when they played our national anthem, I feel like it's impossible to describe that feeling. I just started tearing up, and to dream it, I feel like that's one of the biggest dreams you can have as an athlete, is to be on the court and represent your country. And I was a very, very proud moment.
Yeah. Well, congratulations for accomplishing that. So I know it's always been one of your big goals and dreams.
It really was. Thank you.
So let's talk about college tennis.
Okay.
You had the college tennis career that most players dream of, not only ranking wise, but you won so many awards for your school, and you really went down in your school's history books. What were your expectations going into the world of college tennis?
I don't think I had any expectations, because at the time, I don't think I really knew what I was signing up for. As an international, we were all very, at the academy, we were like, they're getting you ready for college. And
I was like that too. Yeah. I still didn't even know what we were going to get to.
Yeah, so I was like, I have no idea what's going on. And especially because I had a shoulder injury at the start of my senior year, and all of my friends at the time, they were all signing in November. And I'm like late November, just now trying to get my college video going. And, I think at the moment, now looking back, I'm like, how was I not panicking? But I think it's because being oblivious to what's actually going on, and I got very, very lucky with finding a coach who is very determined in helping players and growing them. And especially to this day, he's still my coach. So after all these years, he's really helped me develop into the player and the person I am today. But at the time it felt like a huge risk, because I had just limited amount of weeks to visit a few schools and kind of make the decision. And
what other schools did you look at?
I was mostly looking at schools up north. I was my mom being a doctor, she was very into me doing well academically, and both of my parents were actually really pushing for my academics. So to go, they had no idea what Furman, they didn't know that school existed. And honestly, I didn't either until Adam Harrington called me. It was like, I'm the new coach at Furman University, So where's that? What is that? And then within weeks, I ended up, just after the visit, there was just a feeling that I had that they had there, that it was more like a family feeling. And something about that place reminded me where I grew up. And I was like, you know what? I could see myself.
Just felt like home.
It just felt like home. So literally made the decision within 24 hours. And
that gut instinct.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
But the first year was really, really hard. Just having to adjust to the team environment, being an only child, I was not used to that, right? And all the freshman duties and all those things. And I just, especially the physical aspect of fitness at the time. And we used to run, we used to call it morning madness. And it was, to this day, it's my worst nightmare. Like, I would wake up, go to track, and like my heart's racing, I'm thinking I'm with my team. But I definitely think that's one of the biggest things that pushed me in my college career, getting up. But one of the biggest things I do think that college changed, sometimes I think there are players that go to college as great players and don't get really lucky with a good team and good coaches and good environment that's going to inspire you, push you to be better. And then there are coaches that I really do think can invest, I got really lucky because I'm like, there's some coaches, see me that I struggle physically and see how far behind I am in all these things that would say, oh, she's talented, but she's missing this and this and this. Yeah. But no one really work on it with me, right? And I do think the biggest difference is like, it took a few months, I don't think people believe me. Like Adam and all the rest of the team was like, this is like, she's faking it, she's not trying hard enough. But they realized, those mornings I would literally go past exhaustion. And I think it's like, wow, if she's so far physically and she's already this level of player, like how good can she be if you invest in it? And the biggest thing that made the difference, he would run with me every other day. And at 6 a.m. we would run this well, it was 7 a.m., but I was so nervous I couldn't sleep. So I'd show up at 6 a.m. and just wait there for them to show up. And then eventually my teammates would come and support me, and those are the memories.
So you were on your own doing it for a little bit?
Yes. So basically the way it worked, it was we would have these morning workouts, and then there was this fitness standard test that we had that once you pass it, you're done. Exactly. But once you pass it, you're done. And of course, everyone passed it but me. And I was like not even near passing. I was like way behind.
That's crazy that you were the only one that did it.
I was literally the only one that kept doing it. And I kept doing it honestly throughout my whole college career. I was so far behind starting freshman year that like towards the end of my college career, I kind of got to the point where I was like, okay, finally I'm like near passing this.
What
test.
about like IMG Fitness? Did that not prepare you in some way? Because I remember we did some tests like that as well.
Yes, I do. I do think they have amazing fitness there, right? But I do think one thing that hurt me during high school years that as I was not physically prior to coming to the academy, I was constantly behind. So I would constantly start having these injuries and all these things. So instead of doing fitness with you guys, I would be in the training room trying to do my rehab and get healthy back and get back. And I feel like it was kind of constantly in this thing where I would get healthy. I would start going. I would push a little bit more because I needed to push, but I'd push and then I get injured. It was this constant forward and backwards thing for years until I got to this college level. And I just feel like there's all this other things, aspects. And once the adrenaline gets going, it works miracles.
So true. So you mentioned that Adam was really pushing you and he believed in you. What were some of the key components to the culture that he created that allowed you to really thrive aside from just the running aspect?
Yeah. I do think, of course, every year teams are different and culture changes, but I do think he did an incredible job to kind of push that culture, find the right people, find the right girls on the team that have that work ethic and have that feeling for the team environment. And no matter what happens, you're gonna go put your team first. And I think that's we all know, as girls, it's really hard to be in a team environment because we're all very competitive with each other, right? But I think it's the right coach is gonna find a way when to push, when to kind of pull back, when to set the standards. And I think having standards and morals, just who we are as people, and that coming first, and then who we are as players on the court. And we did a bunch of team gatherings outside the court and just getting to know each other. So
team bonding.
Yes, a lot of team bonding, and of course we had our hard times. I think every team goes through hard times, but it's how you come out of those obstacles that really shows who we are as a team. And I ended up going back for my 5th year because I was a 2020 grad during COVID, and I wanted to start playing professionally that right away, but there was no tournaments. I got my ranking 2 weeks prior COVID started. So I was about 1,200 in the world, and at the time I couldn't really get anywhere. And
that was a crazy time.
It was an insane time. I mean, girls 100 in the world were playing 15Ks. And so he called me up and he said, you know what, I think you should come back and use your 5th year. And I was like, doesn't really make sense, because I was a double major when I graduated, and Furman didn't really offer any of the graduation programs that I was majoring in. So, but then when I realized, and I knew how much I thrived in that environment, and I knew that was going to help me continue to get better. So I said, okay, I'm going to come back for a spring semester. And at this point, I feel like I already achieved all of my individual goals. I already became an All-American. I already became the most improved senior in the country. And to this point, when I was coming back, the one thing I told him, I said, you know what, I'm coming back as a team member. Like, treat me as a freshman. Like, everything I'm doing, I want to help out the team. And I think
not many 5th years would say that. Really.
I think because if I was coming to a new team, it would be very different and very, going to a new school. But coming back to a team that I invested my heart and soul in for 4 years, and I love the girls on that team. And of course, every year we have hardships. And I think that year, after having a hardship throughout the season, I think he bonded us, he brought us closer so much more. That I feel like we had these few weeks that we went on winning. And, Furman, when I went to Furman, we were not ranked. Like, no one knew Furman. And we got the Furman to be in top 25 in the country at the time. And we had these weeks where we were beating teams that were top 20. And it was like a dream 2 weeks for us, and those feelings with the teammates and those celebrations. And that feeling was unbelievable. That's something that I really, really miss on the pro tour. Not having anybody to share that stuff with, and not having people to cheer you on during a match, and just that energy is unmatchable.
Yeah, it's funny how you went from being individual child who didn't like the team environment growing up, went into college with kind of that mindset, and then by the end of it, like that's what you end up missing the most.
Yeah.
You know, was there any point in time in college that you played a match that you felt like you just unlocked a new level, or was it more of like a steady progression?
Great question. I definitely think there were times, one of the things that I feel like in college, because I've been actually thinking about this a lot lately, because confidence is so important, right? Especially with girls, it's everything in tennis. And in pro world, like you go and if you have a few losses in a row, it really takes a toll on you, as much as I feel like we say, oh, we're fine, we play next week. But you can see in all of us the level that we compete at the next time. You could just feel that insecurity a little bit kick in. So I think one of the biggest things in college that I really miss, as Adam was such a huge impact in my college career, having him on the court. Like when I started playing pro, I didn't know how to think by myself, because for years he had the way he worked. He would just, if I wasn't playing well, he would just kind of step up the game and get me mad at him. So like I was like, oh, I'm gonna show you, and kind of wake that Serbian spite inside of me. And I would just play Madi, and I didn't have to think about it.
Which you're so good at, because you're one of the like best competitors out there. Seriously.
Thank you. But I feel like he would burn that like fire inside of me, just like go, But I think by myself for the whole first year, honestly, I was so lost, because I feel like I was trying to figure out a girl how to play and figure out how to have that spite inside, where I'm like, oh, I gotta step in and battle now, but I think, going back to your question, I think in college, you put into work. I think sometimes, a lot of times now, all of us college players, when we start playing pro, we really miss that daily work, right? If you had the right coach who's willing to invest in you, we did individuals all the time on top of team stuff. So having the belief in you, that you put in the work, that you put hours on the court every day, and you have everything right there for you, right? You live in the perfect environment where
you have all the resources,
everything, you have the food, people bringing you stuff, you have stringing your rackets strong every time you need them, like you got physios always around you. It's always the little things, right? And now I have to go always on my own. I'm like, but back there, you got to the point, I think my senior year, I lost one match my whole senior year until COVID started. And then I took that confidence in the following year. I lost only one match my whole fifth season. So having that confidence and having those wins, and I do think a big difference is in college, you play 1 or 2 matches a week, and then you go back to training, which is in pro world, you have to stack those wins up. And you just have to, it goes week after week after week, and you being on the road all the time, you don't really get that, like, you're playing one match and then you go back to where you feel comfortable. You go back to your team and your coaches and your court, and you go home, and then you have that, I feel like, very easy routines that you can rely on. And eventually that really boosts your confidence. But I don't really think there's anything, something like a one match kind of deal. I do think it can show in one match, but I think that's years and years put in work behind the scenes.
That's so true. And then it becomes, like you mentioned, sometimes on the pro tour, you might have like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, even more than 5 losses in a row. And from what I've seen, it's just like the better you get, the more you lose sometimes, because you're playing those higher level tournaments, stronger players. You're not really getting weak opponents ever at that point anymore. Exactly. Whereas in college, I'm sure there are some that are easier than others sometimes. But yeah.
And I do think one of the biggest differences in college, actually, it's one of the benefits for the pro world, is just in college you have a lot of pressure. My 5th year, at one point, I got to being, when I was ranked 7, I was like, there's 6 girls in front of me that if I beat them, maybe I might have a bit of benefit, but the only way I stay here is, but I can't lose, but all these girls that step it, especially the conference we played, like every girl is going to go across the net, like it's going to be mostly ranked below me. And I said, they come in with no pressure, like 0 expectations, and they played their best tennis against me every time. And I had this feeling like I can't lose, because if I lose, my ranking's dropping, and not having the tough schedule towards the end of the year, playing SoCon, right, being that conference, I'm like, I cannot drop under a certain level, because then I'm not going to make my NCAAs. And having the pressure multiply, and I was lucky to keep going up, but definitely it was when I started playing my sophomore year, I started playing 1, and then junior year when I got ranked for the first time, there were matches I was like hyperventilating. I was like, I can't deal with that pressure, you know. But I do think that's the kind of pressure that it strengthens you, but also it's in pro world, it's a different kind of pressure, but you don't have that like life with that kind of feeling on every match.
Well, now it becomes the pressure of if you don't defend the points,
exactly,
then the ranking drops, then you don't get into the tournaments, which almost becomes kind of similar, you know?
For sure, yeah, and then the pressure goes even higher, actually.
Yeah, no, that's so true. So generally, college coaches don't allow players of your caliber to join a sorority, but you did.
Oh, how'd you find that?
How did I know that one? But you did, yeah. So what prompted you to want to join a sorority?
So my freshman year, I feel like personally, I don't think I was a really great teammate just because I was so overwhelmed with all the freshman duties, you know, and I don't mean that just through tennis. I mean that as a student, you know, Furman's a very hard school. Yeah. And on top of that, physically, I was always exhausted. I wasn't used to only sleeping 5-6 hours a night, trying to keep up with schoolwork and then being on court for multiple hours a day. On top of that, you know, we did that at the academy, but I just here the intensity of everything was so much higher. So I feel like I was out in the left field my whole freshman year. And when I came back, I was training there throughout the summer, which really helped me develop my game, having those one-on-ones with the coaches. And then coming back in the fall, we had a bit of a different team, you know, like I said, every year team's different. And I just felt like the team environment really shifted. There was a lot of hiccups and a lot of tension between the girls. And one of my best friends to this day, she was a senior at the time and she was leaving to go abroad for a semester. And I was telling her how hard of a time I was having still finding ways to work through that environment of a team environment, right? And I was like, I don't know what to do, you know, and I am a very social person. I do like to talk to people. And I just think it's in the way you still have your guard up a lot, and that's not true friendships. And so I was telling her, I'm not going to have anywhere really to open up to. I'm really going to miss her. And at the time she was living with with some of her best friends and her roommates were 85 girls. And she said, you know what, how about I talk to my roommates? I'm sure they would love to have you. I'll go, no. That was the one.
Like, what?
Yeah, and especially because that was the one thing I always said no to. You know, like I never say no because you never know what life's gonna throw at you. But like during the sorority was always a no. I was like, no, I want to. That's on me, you know. And but I do think when I ended up talking to her roommates and they explained this whole different side of sorority, and there were so many amazing things they did as a sorority and amazing girls that were part of it. And I do think, I don't know how it is at other schools, but that was a beauty of being part of such a small school. So that year, I ended up joining, I don't really know how to call it, but it wasn't that. It was just two of us, you know. It was kind of like a lucky spot. Two girls fell through, and then there was two spots, and then me and this other girl who's actually one of my best friends to this day. And I feel like that's one thing that's already got me was my friendship with her. And so I'm always going to be grateful for joining. But I think over time, and I'm still in touch with some of the girls there. And that was my sophomore year when I ended up joining. And I kind of didn't tell my coach and just kind of showed up in his office. I was like, so I did a thing.
You didn't tell him?
I didn't really tell him because,
oh my gosh,
because I was a little bit frustrated at the time. I was still learning how to work the selfless team environment.
That's one way to do it. Do it and ask for forgiveness instead of asking for permission.
Yeah, kind of.
I hope you don't get kicked off the team.
Yeah, literally. But I was like, I wasn't really thinking because it happened all throughout a few days. And my friend Lamy, she was like, no, I really think this is going to help you. And when I met the girls, I love the girls that were part of the sorority. And I kind of, the way I was telling them, I said, of course, this is unfortunately not going to be my priority. Tennis and school are always my priority. So this can come in the way of that. And obviously didn't go through initiation yet or anything like that. But when we ended up actually coming to agreement, right? This is how we're going to do things. That's when I went to my coach's office. I was like, so I'm and I think I still regret not really being like, can I do this? Because I was afraid of a no answer, you know. It wasn't.
You were still in the only child.
Yes, I was like, I am doing this. I was was like, but before you say anything, like, it's never going to come in the middle of this. I mean, you should have seen his face. Like, he turned purple. He was like, I cannot believe.
I
like,
can't
what
imagine.
Yeah.
But amazing that you did it, because there's such a stigma around it. I feel like, especially for not only athletes, but like especially athletes of your level, you know, that it's like, it would be like sorority, what, ew, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But do you think that more people should be open to it, and more coaches in Division I women's tennis should be open to allowing their girls to do it?
Yeah, I think that's a tough question, because I got very lucky with my example, because I met the girls, the sorority I was in, the 80 Pi. There's very welcoming, very warm girls who were very supportive of my career and academic and tennis. Like, there was one point, I remember my sophomore year, that it was about 20, 30 girls that came out with some signs cheering me on during one of our biggest matches. And it was like, and this is what it's meant for, you know, like, to create this kind of bonds, and then we kind of be there for each other. And I do think, because I was very involved my sophomore year when I joined, and then throughout time, my tennis, as it started, because I didn't get ranked until my junior year, but that junior year, you know, having to play all those individual tournaments in the fall, I got to miss a lot of, and I was in the business block, which is like the hardest semester for my business degree. I had too many things going on, so I kind of had to withdraw a little bit from that aspect. As that was my promise to my coach. You know, I said, I promise you that whenever I feel like this is going to come in the way of my academics and tennis, this is going to, like, I'm going to press pause and, you know, kind of just go. I don't want to say deactive, as I was part of it. I was trying to do my best when I was on campus. I was seeing the girls and helping them out whichever way I could, but I just feel like I wasn't able to be as involved as maybe I would hope to be if you're part of a sorority.
But were they like quite understanding?
They were completely understanding, you know, but that's one thing that I feel like it's quite hard to encourage someone else, because I know some examples of our sororities, they were very harsh on their standards. They weren't willing to really change that. So it is a bit of a tough of a question, you know, but I definitely think that having meeting more people, because when you're in college, now when we were older, you're like, how do I meet people, you know? And back then, I'm very grateful for those friendships. And they taught me so many lessons, and they kind of showed me ropes to other things that I never knew existed. So I am really grateful for that.
What advice would you give to people who are getting ready to go into the college tennis world, but maybe aren't yet aware of some of the challenges that they're going to face?
Yeah, I definitely think I'm quite a stubborn person. So I think being, you know, open-minded, and I think giving people the benefit of the doubt. And I think one of the things that I struggle with, that I had to learn throughout the years actually as a teammate, first was always give benefit of doubt to your teammate. You know, sometimes I think it's really hard, you know, especially in tennis. I don't know about other sports, but in tennis, it's mostly a group of 10 girls or 8 to 10 girls, and everybody wants to play the one spot. You know, it's like, I feel like in different sports, you have different positions. So there's only 1 or 2 other girls out there that want to play your position. But in tennis, and even day, everybody wants to play one, you know, and only one girl can play one. So of course, that's going to cause tensions. And then with all the academics and sports going on at the same time, we're always tired. We're always exhausted. So I think it's very easy to go, oh, no, I don't want to listen to you. Like, you're not right. This is how I'm doing this, you know, and I'm the one at fault. When I was a freshman, and even in sophomore a little bit, when I was when I was a little older, you know, we had this leadership council that I was put on, and I was like, I don't like, no, like, I was like, this is how we're doing it.
Put on them because it's something else added to your plate.
Exactly.
Like, my plate's full. What are you doing to me?
Exactly. But I definitely think eventually it teaches you that to go from selfish to selfless. You know, as a leader, you have to be selfless. And I do think that eventually, I know you always have to. I think one of the biggest things I was telling the girls as I got older is that when things are wrong, it's easy to point fingers, you know. And I do think one of the biggest things that Adam was really stern on is you have to look in the mirror. Like, it might not be your fault at the time, but let me see what I can do. Even if someone else did it physically, you know, we're all a team. Like, you're all part of it. How can I help this? And what did I do? Instead of being like, you messed this up. For example, back then, like, someone messed up, you run, right? So everybody wants to kill you, especially me, who hates running. So I was like, oh boy, what happened to get to this point? Let's talk about it. Let's, you know, communication is key. So I think always having that open communication with your teammates and also with your professors. I think that's something that I didn't do good enough job, because I had so many things going on from all the traveling. I didn't feel like comfortable being like, oh, I'm just going to walk into my professor's office and talk about this, which as being part of such a small school, that was one of the benefits that we had. Our classes were from 12 to 20 students only.
Mm-hmm.
So all my classmates, they would just go and talk to professors. I'm like, what are you doing?
I was like the queen of that. I feel like I annoyed my professors so badly because I was like, I want to be on their good side. And it's just helpful to know them, whenever you're gone. Yeah, so I was like always going to the professor's office.
Yeah,
after
that's
class,
the thing to them. I did not do that well enough at all.
Yeah, no, it helps. It really helps.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I think open communication with your coaches, your professors, your teammates is always good, and always being okay to kind of speak up if something's wrong.
Yeah.
And I think if freshman, I felt very like, oh my gosh, I'm overwhelmed, but like. I didn't feel like I could say really what's going on just because you're new and you feel like you're the only one part of it. All these
it's
things
so important to have someone to talk to because there's going to be so many new things in front of you your freshman year, especially sophomore year, or even really second semester. You kind of already know what's going on, but yeah, especially first semester.
And in college, we have so many resources, right? Mm-hmm. We got from the training room to the nutrition to the sports psych. You have all these people that are there to help you. So I always say, just always ask for help whenever you need it.
Yeah. So you already touched on some of the differences between college tennis and pro tennis. What was that transition like for you? Like that period going from college tennis straight into pro?
That was really hard because, I lost my mom. I think it's something I don't really talk publicly about much just because it's very personal, but, I talk about it when I feel like I can help someone, go through the grieving process. But it happened right in that transition period when I graduated college, when I was about to start playing pro. And that definitely took a whole year on its own, and I think grieving is something that never stops and comes in all shapes and forms. And it's been over 2 years now and still have hard days. And I think that's all part of it. So I think my path was a little bit different, having to deal with that on top of figuring out how to play professional tennis and dealing with that whole world. Yeah. And even to this day, I'm like, oh, I got this. I finally figured it out. And then there are days where I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing and I want no part of it, and, but I just think eventually as you're going, just like anything else, you're like, I need people to talk to. I need to ask for advice. Mm-hmm. I think just being open and finding ways, because I don't know about others, but I'm a verbal processor and I need to spit it out when something's wrong. I gotta get it out, and I do think so. That first year it's a bit of a hard part to compare to others, right? But I do think one of the things that also would help going through that transition is just kind of trying to be more aware of what's going on with you. I knew that playing professionally on that court, one of the things, like I told you, like I felt very alone on the court. But I don't know if that's part of it because of my mom was my world, my everything. We were extremely close. So that was a huge part in my life already. So on court, I felt this extra loneliness and extra, without my teammates there, without that energy to kind of feed you, because that's one of the beautiful things of playing for a team is when you have hard days, your teammates are there to pick you up. You're never going to be 100%. So, and not never, sorry, but you're going to have days where you're really struggling, but it's always, you have to give 100%, even if that's of that 30% that you have that day. Mm-hmm. But it's your teammates to step in when you're having those days, right?
And lift you up.
Exactly.
You get back to
if you have the right culture and the right people around you, right? And I think having to create that, it took me a bit of time, but just being aware that every path is different, every path is unique. And I think one of the main things is that you find people that are going to have that for you and they're going to lift you up when you're down, and people that are going to support you and push you, because it's so easy to get in your head when you're constantly on the road traveling by yourself and you're constantly trying to do, at the end of the day, you're the only one out there competing, right? You can't have your coach next to you. You can't have your teammate cheering you on the sideline. So, at least not the ITF level, right? When you're starting.
It's now the rules are
it's kind of
maybe you can't, because depends what tournament you're playing.
Right.
But so even from whenever you and I started college, mental health has become so much more normalized to talk about. So whenever you feel those things, like feelings of loneliness on court, even, how do you manage it?
Good question. I think I've grown a lot in that aspect, but one of my key things, I love journaling. That's one thing I would always suggest to anybody doing. And of course, talking to a professional about it always helps. They always have this perfect ways of finding things to help you work through it, and it starts with being aware of what's going on. And for me, that's journaling. Sometimes when I write out, I have all these thoughts, I feel so lost. And then when I kind of blur it all out there, and it's like, okay, this is what's going on. And I think I've talked to enough professionals this time. They were like, okay, this is what I should kind of do if I don't have a chance of talking to somebody at the point. But yeah.
That's so good that you found a way. And I also love to journal. And I always think it's so funny whenever I find an old journal and I look back and I see the dates and it's like, okay, February 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th. And then it'll be like nothing for 3 months. And then it'll be like June 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, And so it's like whenever I feel like I need it, that is something I can do. And I kind of know like that's something I can always fall back on that helps lift me up. But again, like I used to not do that until I had that recommended to me by someone. So
and it's funny because sometimes I go back and look at this journal. Like on that day, like I was feeling this and this, and then I read it. I was like, wow, it's really not that big of a deal now.
It's so funny how like the importance of things change, and you're like, why did I even care?
Why did I care?
Why did I waste my energy?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, that's so funny. So as I said earlier, you've won 2 pro titles in singles, both Colorado.
Yes.
What did you feel whenever you won your first title in Colorado?
I think that first one honestly didn't feel real. I think my celebration last year when I won it, I think it was much bigger. I don't know if it gave me a lot more points, whether, I think I was in that world. They
raised the level, right?
They did raise the level. I went from 15 to 25. And, but I feel like that feeling, at this point, I feel like winning that 15K and winning 25. Now the points are different again this year, but back then it was 40 points difference. And that made a huge drastic change on my ranking, and I remember freaking out before the match, and I was like, no, I have to go back. Because one of the things that really helps me is not thinking about the outcome, focusing a point at a time, and you have to stay in the present. And that's all easy to say, hard to do, So yes. I think I remember being in that finals, and when I was playing her, I won that first set 6-3. And sometimes, like, when you constantly in your groove, I don't think about the score, I don't think about anything. But she went to the bathroom, and I was sitting, I was like, shoot, I just won the first set. Shoot, I'm a set away from it. And then that's when the nerves kicked in. I was like, oh my gosh.
When you have the time to sit and think about it.
Yes.
Like, better not to think, just
exactly.
go. That's why people take the bathroom breaks sometimes.
Exactly. But I do think last year it met so much more opportunities. Of course, years came on, and it felt a bit of it like a relief, having to accomplish something like that. And, it is it's not really comparable when it comes to rankings and stuff from college to pro world, but winning a title, it's something extra, winning is like, it's already hard itself, but to win a title, it gives us some sort of a acknowledgement to it. So you're like,
and to be able to back it up, not only once, but then backing it up the next year.
That's
in the
a
same
special
place.
Yeah.
Well, now they've taken that tournament off the schedule this year.
They did. I'm hoping they're gonna bring it back.
Would you ever go back and visit?
For sure. That's always gonna be like my special place. Like, I love Colorado Springs. It's like one of the most gorgeous places to me in the world. So.
Maybe I'll go with you.
Let's do it.
Take a little vacation.
We'll have fun. Yeah.
Even though we're in Florida, So a lot of people lean into some sort of faith whenever they experience hardships, especially. Is that something that you have at all, or on court or off court?
For sure. I definitely think no matter the faith, from as I've traveled, I've seen so many different people, cultures, and faiths around the world. But I do think, I have my faith, and that's something that does ground me. But in the same time, I think everybody has that deeper purpose and deeper meaning that gives them peace, because I think at the end of the day you have to go back to having your why and why you do things and why we do everyday life stuff, and that comes from deeper meaning that I think faith gives.
100%. So we're getting close to the end of the podcast. Just a couple more questions for you. Earlier we touched on you being someone who wasn't a clear standout whenever you were in high school. What advice would you give to the kids who maybe feel that way right now, and like there's other people around them who are overshadowing them in their success?
I definitely wasn't one of the standouts, and I just feel like now looking back, all comes down to work ethic, determination, resilience, and the deep belief that you can do it. And it has to come in within you and from people around you, but mostly it has to come from you. Because if you don't believe in yourself, no one will.
100%.
So I definitely think you have to find, and I think that belief comes with having your why and why you love the sport and why you do the things you do. So when things get hard, because there's always going to be ways they're going to get hard. It's never going to be easy, right? And I'm just easy, great. And so I just think having your why and having the belief and self-talk is very important, and the way you treat yourself and eventually prioritizing yourself and having standards for yourself. And if you put in the work and if you talk to yourself the right way, you have the belief that you're like, I got this and I believe in myself, especially because you can feel that belief when you're on the court. That's where the confidence comes from. And I just feel like with overtime, it's easy to give up earlier, right? When you lose your results, but it's people who stay resilient through those tough times and see the longer path. And remember that every path is different. Like if I could have given up a long time ago because I wasn't seeing any results, right? And the thing is, you stay with it. And, of course you can't ever do it alone. So have the right people by you eventually throughout time. I do think everyone can accomplish whatever they set their mind to.
100%. Especially now you're seeing the longevity in the sport going so much more. People are playing later and later, which is so amazing to see. But no, it's so true. Whenever you feel like, people are saying things or maybe don't believe in you and it starts to weigh you down, it can be like, wait, why does it even matter what they think? It just only matters what I think, because I'm the one that has to get up and take action each day and go do the thing,
Exactly. And I do think, like you said, the longevity in sport is so important. Actually, the other day, for the first time, I had someone, when I started playing college, the mindset was, oh, she's going to college, she's done with pro, like she's never going to try it. But I think during my time at college, a lot more college players started playing professionally and they've had some incredible results, right? And there's now everyone's going to college with the belief that they can play pro. And that's kind of the path, like the way they choose college that's going to help them be a stepping stone for their pro career.
Right, especially like you touched on all the resources.
Exactly.
There's so many resources that can now help people go from college to pro.
Exactly. And I would always be the first one to advise anybody, find the right environment. College is going to help you get there, So I feel like back in the day, people were like, oh, she's done with pro. But now I had the other day, I was telling someone asked how old I was. And I was like, I'm 25. I said, wow, you're so young. I'm like, I've never heard that for the tennis world,
right?
I think older people like 25 is old, but they're like, now girls are maturing much later, late 20s. So like, wow, I'll take that, And I do feel like, because there's definitely times where you see these young girls come on, right, and start playing, and their bodies just can endure a lot more, and they have none of that pressure, just have this like extra energy. And you can feel that even from college players that step into pro world right away. They got no expectations, and then they got this burning desire to just play tennis, have fun, and just let's go out there and kick it, right? Which is some of the things that I think us that have been playing this for a few years, it kind of takes a toll on you a little bit. So it's kind of
almost nice not knowing what you don't know.
Exactly. And having all those firsts again. But now having that working, I think it's key to always. It's one of the things I'm always trying to work on and have that kind of rekindle that fire inside of you, because
again, remembering your why.
Exactly. Remembering your why, which is so hard to do when you're literally, people ask me where I live. I say, I live in a suitcase. I'm literally really never unpacked. I'm always I live in
Airbnbs.
I mean, you've done it with me. We've done it together. And there are times where you get sick, right? And you're like, I flew across the world and I can't play. What do I do? So just kind of finding still that fire and the love for the sport in the midst of everything going on and having to play and everything. Because at the end of the day, the most important part and most fun part is playing tennis. But actually, the most time it takes is all this planning around it, right? Like traveling, where I'm going to stay, the hotels, the transport, the food, and the difference in the food, and the jet lag, and who I'm going to hit with, organizing practices.
And you have to do it so far in advance, but you don't always know where you're going to be.
Exactly.
So it's like, how do you plan and you don't know what country you're going to be in?
Exactly. And it always goes from like, let's say you lose Thursday or Friday and you're booking out a flight for the next day. And you're like, well, I'm going to Europe, I guess, because it's nothing this side of the world to play anymore, right? So I think I was such a type A person. I still am in a way, but I'm working on it. And I think it's letting go, try and have those long-term plans. Yes, you have long-term goals, but I think being like, this is what I'm doing this and this day. I don't think it's really possible in this career. And I think people around me, all my friends, none of them are in this world. So I think eventually throughout the last few years, they had to adapt to be like, I'll see you when I see you.
Mm-hmm.
And we all know that we're going to do more than we can to go above and beyond to like kind of keep that in touch. But I'm like, I literally don't know where I'm going to see you. The other time, like I was like passing through, I'm like, maybe if I'm nearby, I can take a short flight there and see you. But it's just kind of letting go of that expectation. Like, this is where I'm going to be in the next 2-3 weeks. And it's all about, I know
it's such a sacrifice.
It really is. Yeah, it takes a lot of sacrifice that I do think, once again, go back to your why, because I mean, there are times where like, is this all worth it? Like all the sacrifices, are they worth it? So you have to go back to the why and I do think it's important to sometimes like kind of redo your why, because we all grow as people, we change. So I think having that time to be like, no, this new version of me, this is what I want, this is how I want it. So I think it's important to sometimes redo it every once in a while.
Yeah, no, that's such a good point. I've never even thought about it like that, but I love that. So what are some of your short-term goals and long-term goals for your tennis career?
Great question. I am trying to, I think right now, when the start of the year, when at this 300 level ranking, you feel like you're so close to Grand Slam qualifying, but you're so far, and I think part of me put a little too much pressure on myself with just expecting results. And then I've been having the last few weeks, I had a bit of struggles with my back the last few months. And, that obviously takes a step back, and I haven't been playing the well I've been playing. And I think it got to the point since that burnout I had last year, most of the time I feel like I didn't enjoy being on court anymore. I didn't, at the end of the day, if you don't enjoy what you do, then why are we doing this? Why are we sacrificing so much? So I think my short-term goal is just going back to enjoying the everyday grind of it, and every day just having fun with it, as you're putting in the work. Be like, because a lot of times lately, I feel like it felt like a job. You feel like I have to do this, but you don't have to do this. You do it because you want to, and it comes with a lot of sacrifices, but it really is worth it in the end of the day.
What are you doing to help yourself find that joy on the court again?
I think it goes back to journaling, goes back to the why, goes back to remembering why I am here, and then they kind of just zooming out a little bit, trying to look at the bigger picture, and like, there's like, what if I didn't, there's like no what ifs, because you can't predict the future. You don't know what's going to happen. And at the end of the day, your health is the most important thing, is staying healthy. So I think just going back to the daily, just being grateful for daily stuff that I have, and just going back, I love tennis. We have come so far already, and I have done a lot of things that I haven't always dreamt of. And in a way, I am living the dream. Yeah. I think that's easy to forget when you're living in it every day on the grind. So
yeah, and even sometimes like acknowledging the things you have accomplished, like giving yourself credit. I feel like what makes so many tennis players great is like almost not doing that sometimes, and feeling like they haven't accomplished enough. And so that's what keeps pushing them to get to something greater and greater and greater. But that can weigh on people.
Exactly.
So sometimes it's like, okay, I really have accomplished a lot. Like, let's enjoy that for a second,
Exactly. At the end of the day, I think we all feel pressure, as you go higher, you feel more and more pressure. But the main pressure comes from you, I think. I think we have to let go of other people's expectations, right? Because that doesn't really matter. It matters what we want out of ourselves and what we expect. And I think sometimes part of the pressure that I've realized I struggle with is I put my pressure and my expectations on the outcome, and it's never a good thing, right? You have to put your expectations on kind of like process goals, and like, this is what I'm gonna do and focus on doing, and then if it turns out the way it should, it will. Eventually, if you keep doing, just like in college, if you keep putting in the work, if you keep putting in daily fitness, everything, but that includes also mentally being engaged. You can't just go out there and hit balls. So I think if you feel like deep down you put into work every day, I think that's where the confidence comes from.
It's so funny because everything you say, things like little like sayings that we've heard so much over the years keep popping in my head. I'm like, trust the process, quality over quantity. Like, those are things we've had ingrained in us, but they're so true. And you hear them so much that it can almost just sound like, another phrase, but they actually have a lot of meaning. And I can't tell you
enough how many times, like, lately I've been talking to my coach, and he's like, I've been telling you that for years. I'm like, I know, but it had to click in my head by myself. Like, I had to come to this decision by myself to be like, no, this is what I'm going to do, right? Because At the end of the day, the only way we keep doing something and have that sacrifice and have that why, it has to be our why. It can't be someone else's why. We can't be doing it for our parents or our grandma or somebody around us. We have to do it for us. And if we're not doing it for us, we have to find what that our purpose is, what we want to be doing. And sometimes the hardest part is being like identifying and saying it out loud that it might not be what you hoped it would be. But I do believe all of us have a purpose out there. It's on us to find it and to do what we love.
Agreed. What about long-term goals?
Oh, it's kind of hard to say long-term. As I said, I'm going to focus on process goals. Right. But definitely I am hoping to keep going up the rankings and have more opportunities, play high level tournaments and go back to, enjoying the daily grind and staying out there for a few more years. Because when it gets tough, you're like, I'm done. This is it. I'm changing careers. I can't do it. The really dark thoughts come along. And I think just long term, it's finding the beauty in this crazy sacrificial life. Because every job, I think, takes sacrifice, some more than the others in a way. And I just think you weigh out your pros and cons and you're like, you commit to it. And when the hard times come, like, no, this is still what I chose. And this is the reason I love doing it. So I think in the long term, a few years from now, I'll be like, I just want to know I did everything that I set out for myself to do. Not result wise, but just kind of like, I know I gave my 100% in a way. And so I think the next few years, I'm hoping the ranking's going to head that way, but I'm sure even if it doesn't, like, there's going to be a reason. I do believe things happen for a reason. So as long as we learn along the way and we grow as people, and eventually I want to come out of it, because already I'm like, I have all these new things I've learned because of this career, that who knows where I'm going to be a few years from now, just by being in it and living this life. So
yeah. Katarina, do you have a website, and how can people find you on social media?
Ooh, I do have Instagram. It's Kata.Koz. Sorry, I made that name way young, back in high school. So don't judge me for it.
You can't change it now.
No changing anymore. Too many tag pictures.
Once you got the blue check mark too, you can't change it.
Yeah. So that's pretty much where I'm at. I actually had another Instagram. It was called Pro Life with KK that I was really passionate about. I was doing, but I really wanted to bring kind of light of all this different life that's going on behind the scenes, because I think when people think of professional tennis, they only think about the people they see on TV, and they forget about thousands of players out there. They're amazing players. They haven't had the chances. They haven't had the runs to get to that point yet. And it's a very different life, and with that, I was pushing that social media for a few months. And I was enjoying the text and the image that it was portraying and the effect it was having on people. But I think my hardest part, I'm not so great at editing and videoing. And, at times I forget. I think
it's time consuming.
Exactly. I think eventually from all the traveling, it was just so hard to keep up with it, that it was part of like towards the burnout towards the end of the year. I was like, this is too much. I can't keep doing it. And I do think there's a part of me that I regrets a little bit, because now I get some DMs to this current Instagram. They're like, oh, what happened to your Instagram? We really missed it. We enjoyed watching that stuff. I said, it's tough, because I'm like, if I had someone do it for me, I'll do it all the time. I would just tell what's going on, but having to post it definitely takes a few hours. I'm not good at it, so it's definitely going to take a lot longer than someone who's good at it, But on top of that, and having your hours already on court and recovery and everything going on,
the mental rest too.
Exactly. And I just think it was a little bit too much, and I would have loved to keep doing it. And same with my ebook that I wrote. The purpose of it is to help younger student athletes going into it, and I still have it. I just haven't really been pushing it out there, because I kind of get myself to be like, I'm going to focus on the career while I'm still in it, because it was a little bit too time consuming.
Yeah. But it goes back to almost what you said, like you have to do it because you want to do it, and not because some other people are enjoying it.
Exactly.
So who knows, maybe it'll come back at some point, but till then, just Kata.Koz on Instagram.
That's right.
Katarina, thank you so much for joining me today. This was absolutely amazing.
Thank you for having me. I absolutely love it. I'm honored to be your first guest.
Honored to have you.
Thank you so much for listening to Beyond the Match. Please be sure to rate and review this episode. If you have questions or comments, you can email us at beyondthematch@outlook.com. We're available anywhere you listen to podcasts, and I do mean anywhere. Please also be sure to follow us on Instagram at Beyond the Match Podcast and look for exclusive content from our episodes only found on our YouTube pages. Until next time, thank you for listening, and I will see you on the courts.
Metacortex Publishing hopes that you've enjoyed this presentation.
Please take a moment to listen to some other podcast offerings from Metacortex Publishing.
A quest is a search for something. And every week, the Quest podcast will show you how we know what we know through interviews with people that have incredible stories of dedication and perseverance. I'm your host, Todd Fisher. Join me in this thought-provoking and inspiring podcast of discovery. Find us anywhere you listen to podcasts.
The Danceology podcast interviews the great masters of dance, the working professionals starring in today's most exciting shows, and the rising stars ready to amp up the craft. I'm your host, Edyta Stawinska from Dancing with the Stars. Join me as I dive into the world of dance, uncovering unique stories and the fascinating personalities of industry professionals on Danceology.
The No Earthly Explanation podcast investigates the things that are unexplainable, hosted by world-renowned investigative researcher Donald R. Schmidt and scientist Ellie Ringo. Follow them as they look for evidence for things that have no earthly explanation. Available anywhere you listen to podcasts.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. Please be sure to rate and review this episode. This podcast is produced by Todd Fisher and Anthony Smith and is distributed by Metacortex Publishing. This podcast is copyright. Any previously trademarked or copyright content is used by permission. Information and opinions stated in this podcast should not be construed as medical advice. Please be sure to visit the official website for Metacortex Publishing at metacortexpublishing.com or find us on social media for other unique content.